Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me today, and this story comes from Liverpool. This is one of the first cases where they've used evidence from EncroChat in a courtroom since the hack in the UK. Similar to the story of Thomas Mayer that we covered the other day, they built a case after discovering the EncroChat messages. They put surveillance on them for a long time, and they believe the conspiracy was up to £50 million worth of cocaine, importation and distribution direct from sources abroad. The police said that Mark Cavanagh was the head of this gang, and his codename on EncroChat was Head Fluffy. And they discovered from these messages that he was boasting about ordering Class A drugs and also his grafting ability, which translates to how much drugs he could sell. Cavanagh was from Wirral, and he called on wholesalers from Merseyside, Manchester and beyond to make sure his stocks of heroin and cocaine would meet his demand in the Ellesmere Port area of Chester. Detectives believed he may have sold almost 50 kilos of Class A drugs across the two operations, raking in as much as £2.3 million. The 30-year-old started up the drugs line, nicknamed the Dell Line and the Dark Line, after he moved to Ellesmere Port. He used his connections in Wirral and further afield to create a network of suppliers, couriers and safe houses that allowed him to gain a foothold in the town's drug trade. He then offered substances of greater purity than his rivals, and undercover officers found that he generously filled his street-level deals so that customers got more drugs for their money, and it was also better quality as well than they would get from anyone else for the same price. Cavanagh's tactic helped him to eventually rule over the Class A's in the area, and his reputation grew to the extent that addicts were travelling to Ellesmere Port from North Wales to get their fix from his dealers. His ability to overcome rivals stemmed from his contact book. Through his EncroChat-enabled mobile phones, Cavanagh tapped into a web of suppliers across the north of England and Scotland. EncroChat, they believe, was used by top-tier gangsters across Europe. The software was expensive and was seen as impenetrable, and this meant that many people spoke very freely in their messages sent through the system. Cavanagh's home was raided, and he already admitted supplying Class A drugs when it emerged detectives on mainland Europe had hacked into EncroChat and having seized phones from him. Cheshire police sought to break into his messages to have a look inside his mind. In doing so, they found out that he operated under a series of code names, the final one being Head Fluffy. Messages showed that across these 3 days in June 2020, Cavanagh told of selling 2 kilos of high purity cocaine for £37,000 each, and he refused to buy from somebody else because the price was too high that they was asking for. And he also ordered 4 kilos of cocaine on credit and a deal that would cost him more than £130,000. He also boasted that he'd been grafting for 15 years via messages intercepted by the police. The prosecution said about Cavanagh at Chester Crown Court, the encryption phone is the best demonstration that Mark Cavanagh was an individual who had the means to supply multi-kilos of cocaine and heroin. His organisation, equipped with those stocks, were able to adulterate the product and, in the case of cocaine, convert it into crack before distributing it to the network of dealers in Chester and Ellesmere Port. As well as those messages, detectives uncovered evidence that Cavanagh had started to transfer money to Colombia, one of the world's most prominent areas for cocaine distribution. The transfers started in early 2020 and they were for hundreds of pounds, leading the police to speculate that he was starting to make contacts in South America and perhaps ordering samples of drugs himself. Before Cavanagh's sentencing hearing this week, the judge, Stephen Everett, said he received letters from Cavanagh and his partner, both asking for leniency in their sentencing, and mentioned the fact that Cavanagh had missed the birth of his son because he was in jail. Mark Cavanagh's defence solicitor said he was not a criminal who used firearms to protect his enterprise, and he has shown genuine remorse for his actions. The judge said he had done a terrible thing to the area, but I do understand the trauma your partner is going through, and I accept the real punishment is you not being here for the birth of your child. But I cannot ignore the anguish and trauma and misery inflicted upon hundreds of people from the dealing of your drugs in the area. Mark Cavanagh was jailed for 14 years and 6 months after admitting conspiracy to supply heroin and cocaine. The sentence included 12 months handed down to him for dangerous driving, following a separate incident where he run undercover police officers off the road. His defence solicitor said that he believed the officers were rival criminals. And in a follow-up to that story as well, 4 more people involved in the conspiracy were also jailed. Liam Roberts, Hakeem Stockton, Anthony Carr and Curtis McHugh all appeared at Chester Crown Court on September the 29th to be sentenced, having pleaded guilty to supplying crack cocaine and heroin. They had 2 established lines in 2 different areas, in Chester and Ellesmere Port. They estimate approximately between 21 kilos and 42 kilos of Class A drugs were moved via these 2 lines. Police valued the one line as between £278,000 and £500,000, and the Ellesmere Port line they believe was worth between £900,000 and £1.8 million. Roberts and Stockton were seen as trusted lieutenants, and the prosecuting barrister Simon Perry told the court that Carr and McHugh were street dealers. In addition, Roberts from Great Sutton had previously received a suspended sentence in 2018 for supplying cocaine in Rosie's nightclub. Police and security recalled and he swallowed his SIM card before they could access it. The court heard he was in breach of a 12-month suspended sentence and had a total of 12 convictions for 14 offences. Stockton from Ellesmere Port had admitted GBH and common assault charges for offences that happened in March 2020. McHugh had no previous convictions and was involved in the drugs gang in March 2020 as well, and he supplied drugs to undercover police officers. When he was caught by the police moments later, he said, "It's the first time I've done it," adding, "Scouse Mark made me do it," in reference to the gang leader Cavanagh. He also said having a stash of 93 kilos of Class A drugs at his address, and Carr, who previously had 15 convictions for 26 offences, had been supplying heroin to undercover police in February as part of the gang in Ellesmere Port. Peter Barnett, defending Roberts, said that he got involved while he was depressed and had a cocaine addiction, and his involvement was not as bad as the others. A previous pre-sentence report shown that Roberts was to be immature, with a lack of consequential thinking and shown remorse. He had a partner and a child in July. Philip Clemo, defending Stockton, said that while Stockton's role in the gang was significant, it was as high as any other trusted lieutenant previously sentenced, and his involvement was limited. He also said that he's made changes to his life and he was now coaching a 5-a-side football team for disadvantaged children. Oliver King, who was defending McHugh, said the defendant had been up front with the police about his offending. Up until the age of 20, he had never taken drugs, and due to a relationship breakdown and the death of 2 close friends, he was introduced to cannabis and became addicted, and he racked up a debt, and he was put under pressure to pay it off. Chris Hunt, who was defending Carr, said the father of 3 had gotten into a cannabis debt after being supplied with a mountain bike and told to cycle to various spots to do drug deals. He voluntarily gave himself up. He wanted to express that he'd let his family down, and he earned about £300 from it. He said it wasn't worth it. This is a brilliant example of the sort of excuses and defences that people will use in court in these sort of cases, and these really do go into consideration with the judge. Roberts was jailed for 58 months for drug conspiracy and a further 12 months for breaching his suspended sentence. Stockton was jailed for 50 months and a further 12 months for GBH and common assault. McHugh and Carr were jailed for 22 months both as well. Further members of the Cavanagh stock will be sentenced at Chester Crown Court on Wednesday. And in a very similar case that also happened in Cheshire on Wednesday the 9th of September, and also involved a serious organised crime unit making arrests. They do not mention in this case if EncroChat was involved, but there is a lot of similarities in relation to the amount of people that they arrested and the amount of evidence they suggest they had. It was a gang in Warrington that they say were very high up on the scale. And it was an 18-month operation that they used surveillance, and they believed they were supplying Class A and B drugs. Footage also shows them using a chainsaw to gain access to the property as well. And several people aging from 29 to 62 were arrested for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. The warrants took place in Warrington and also the Merseyside area. Detective Chief Inspector Mike Hughes from the Serious Organised Crime Unit said this was a lengthy investigation, and it's great to see the sentences have been passed down by the court. Cavanagh saw an opportunity to take over a small town and make a monopoly of drug dealing in Ellesmere Port. His dangerous actions caused misery for anyone who got in his way. This operation shows that when acting on information from the community, we can bring down gangs who believe they are above the law. And that is a very fair point, but at the same time, EncroChat is what brought these gangs down. It wasn't their policing or community spirit. From what I can see in relation to the case, all the evidence was based around EncroChat. None of it was references from witnesses or neighbours, but at the same time, there was a lot of surveillance that these guys were under as well. So I really want to hear what people have to say on this, and don't forget this video was also sponsored by Secure SIM, the best way to keep your conversations private. Scarcity in no way endorses any criminal activity that you do on your devices. We just want you to stay secure and stay safe. So go and follow Secure SIM online on Instagram and securesims.com. Peace.